The dust hadn't settled from the gunfight when Calla Monroe stepped over her husband's body. Jake's blood seeped into the Colorado dirt, mixing with the red clay until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She didn't look back, couldn't afford to. The saddlebag clutched in her trembling hands weighed heavier than lead, not from coins or gold, but from the burden of what lay inside: maps, forged documents, and secrets that could hang a dozen men. 3 riders approached from the east, their horses kicking up clouds that caught the dying light. Calla pressed herself against the barn wall, her heart hammering beneath the worn fabric of her dress. She recognized them, Jake's men, come to collect their share of yesterday's bank job. They'd find him soon enough, sprawled in the dirt with a bullet between his eyes, courtesy of a rival gang's ambush. When they did, they'd come looking for her, and for the bag. She slipped through the shadows to where her mare waited, already saddled. The horse nickered softly, sensing her mistress's fear. Calla swung up, wincing at the bruises Jake's fists had left along her ribs just 2 nights prior. Death hadn't come soon enough for that devil of a man. She'd married him at 17, thinking his swagger and silver tongue meant protection. Instead, she'd traded one kind of hell for another. The road stretched empty before her as she rode hard into the gathering darkness. Behind her, shouts erupted. They'd found Jake. Calla urged the mare faster, her dark hair whipping free from its pins. She'd been running all her life. It seemed from poverty, from her father's drunken rages, from Jake's cruelty. But this time was different. This time, she carried proof of crimes that reached deep into territorial government. Names, dates, amounts, all carefully documented in Jake's own hand. Miles blurred together. Towns rose and fell away like mirages. Guthrie, where families huddled in burned-out shells of homes. Coyote Creek, where widows sold everything they owned for a handful of flour. Each settlement bore scars from the violence that men like Jake had wrought. Children with hollow eyes watched her pass. Women, aged before their time, clutched babies to their breasts. The weight of it pressed down on Calla's conscience like stones. She'd known Jake was cruel, but seeing the aftermath of his gang's raids carved something raw inside her chest. How many of these people had lost everything because she'd kept silent? How many fathers wouldn't come home because she'd helped Jake hide his plans? The saddlebag burned against her hip, accusing. After a week of hard riding, switching horses twice and doubling back to lose any pursuit, Calla spotted Dust Hollow nestled between red rock mesas and endless desert. The town looked forgotten by God and government alike, perfect for disappearing. She studied it from a ridge, noting the single main street, the modest church, the sheriff's office with its sagging porch, small enough to go unnoticed, large enough to find work. She buried the saddlebag beneath a distinctive rock formation 2 miles outside town, memorizing every landmark. Then she rode in slowly, transforming herself with each step the mare took. By the time she reached Main Street, she was no longer Calla Monroe, the outlaw's bride. She was Sarah Brennan, widow of a mining man, seeking honest work and a fresh start. The Sweetwater Inn sat at the town's heart, its painted sign creaking in the desert wind. Calla tied her mare to the post and stepped inside, blinking against the dimness. The proprietress, a sturdy woman with steel-gray hair, looked up from her ledger. "Help you, miss?" "Ma'am," Calla corrected softly, touching the simple gold band she still wore. "I'm recently widowed, looking for work, if you have need." The woman's eyes softened. "Martha Hensley. Sorry for your loss. Dear mining accident?" Calla nodded, letting her shoulders droop with practiced grief. "Cave in. Left me with nothing but memories and trail dust." "Well, Sarah, that is your name. Sarah, I could use help. Board, meals, and $2 a week. Works hard but honest. Honest work is all I seek. Mrs. Hensley." That night, Calla lay in the narrow bed above the kitchen, listening to the town settle into sleep. Somewhere out there, Jake's men were hunting. Somewhere, lawmen were connecting crimes to names. She thought of the buried saddlebag and what it represented, evidence that could topple powerful men, but also a noose around her own neck. The next morning brought routine, washing linens, serving breakfast to traveling merchants, sweeping floors that would only get dusty again. Calla embraced the monotony, but during the noon meal service, her blood ran cold. Two men at corner tables spread a newspaper between them, and even from across the room, she could see her own face sketched there. Wanted, Calla Monroe, widow of outlaw Jake Monroe, suspected of conspiracy, armed and dangerous. She forced herself to pour coffee steady-handed, to smile at crude jokes, to act as though her world hadn't just tilted sideways. The men discussed the bounty, $500, dead or alive. One mentioned how she'd probably fled to Mexico. The other wondered aloud what kind of woman would marry such a devil, the kind with no choice. Calla whispered to herself, scrubbing dishes until her hands went raw. Days passed in careful vigilance. She altered her appearance subtly, darkening her hair with coffee grounds, adopting a slight stoop, speaking rarely and softly. The town began accepting her presence the way they accepted tumbleweeds and dust storms, as part of the landscape. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. A child's scream pierced the air outside. Calla rushed out to see a boy of maybe 6, trapped beneath an overturned wagon, his pony thrashing in the traces. Without thinking, she dove forward, using strength born of desperation to lift the wagon's edge while someone pulled the child free. "Tommy!" A young woman scooped up the boy, tears streaming. "Oh, thank the Lord! He'll be fine," Calla said, checking the child's limbs with gentle hands. Scared more than hurt. That's when she felt eyes on her. Raising her head, she met the steady gaze of a man wearing a sheriff's star. He stood tall and straight, with shoulders that spoke of military bearing and eyes the color of storm clouds. Everything about him radiated authority and uncompromising justice. "Quick thinking, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Strong, too. Not many women could have lifted that wagon. Desperation lends strength." "Sheriff," she replied carefully. "Seth Rourke." He touched his hat brim. "And your Mrs. Hensley's new help, Sarah Brennan, wasn't it?" The way he said her assumed name made her stomach clench. Did he know? Was he testing her? "Yes, sir, Widow Brennan." His eyes lingered on her face a moment too long. "Welcome to Dust Hollow. Widow Brennan. We're a law-abiding town. I'm sure you'll find it peaceful here." The words sounded like both greeting and warning. Calla nodded, gathering her skirts to return inside. She felt his gaze follow her all the way to the door. In that moment, she knew her running had only begun, because Sheriff Seth Rourke had the look of a man who never stopped digging until he found the truth, and Calla carried too many truths that could get her hanged. Seth Rourke sat at his desk, badge catching the morning light as he studied the wanted posters that arrived with yesterday's mail. His fingers lingered on one particular sketch. Calla Monroe. Something about those eyes seemed familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen them before. He set the poster aside and reached for the letter he'd read a dozen times already, the one from his mother back in Kansas, still asking when he'd come home, still not understanding why he'd chosen this God-forsaken place to enforce the law. The answer was buried with his brother Samuel, 3 years cold in a pine box. Sam had been riding shotgun for Wells Fargo when Jake Monroe's gang hit the stage outside Tombstone. They'd left no witnesses, but Seth knew. The calling card of violence, the specific cruelty of it, that was Monroe's work. When Seth heard the bastard had been killed in Colorado, he'd felt cheated. Justice by another outlaw's bullet wasn't justice at all. Now Monroe's widow was wanted, and that raised questions. Was she victim or accomplice? Seth had seen both kinds, women forced into criminality by circumstance and those who chose it willingly. He thought of Sarah Brennan lifting that wagon, the controlled strength in her movements, the way she'd scanned the street even while helping the child. Those weren't the actions of a simple mining widow. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Martha Hensley stood in his doorway, wringing her hands. "Sheriff, I hate to bother you, but I'm worried about my new help." Seth leaned back, keeping his expression neutral. "Sarah Brennan, what's troubling you? Martha?" She cries in her sleep, terrible nightmares, calling out for someone to stop. Stop what? I don't know. And Sheriff, I've seen bruises, old ones, fading yellow and green, around her ribs when her sleeve rode up. The information settled into Seth's mind like pieces of a puzzle. Her husband's death must have been hard on her. "That's just it," Martha continued. "She talks about a mining accident, but Sheriff, I've been around mining folk all my life. She doesn't speak like them, doesn't know the terms." When old Pete mentioned drift mining yesterday, she looked blank as paper. After Martha left, Seth walked his rounds, but his mind kept circling back to the woman at the inn. He observed her from a distance over the following days, how she kept to the shadows, how she startled at sudden movements, how she worked herself to exhaustion as if trying to disappear into the routine. The inconsistencies mounted. Her hands were work-roughened, but not in the way of a miner's wife. She moved like someone used to riding, not walking. When she thought no one was watching, her posture straightened, revealing a natural grace at odds with her humble persona. Most telling was how she handled the inn's difficult customers, deflecting trouble with words chosen too carefully, managing violent drunks with techniques that spoke of hard experience. Seth's suspicions crystallized the day he saw her reaction to a traveling gun salesman. The man had spread his wares on a table in the inn's common room. Colts, Remingtons, a few Winchester rifles. Sarah Brennan had frozen in the doorway, her face draining of color. When the salesman had picked up a particular model, a .45 with custom grips, she'd backed away, hand at her throat. That evening, Seth made his decision. He entered the inn just as Sarah was serving supper to a table of ranch hands. She glanced up, and, for just a moment, naked fear flashed in her eyes before she smoothed it away. "Evening, Sheriff?" Martha called out. "Your usual table?" "Actually, Martha, I was hoping Mrs. Brennan might join me. I'd like to discuss the incident with the wagon. The town council wants to recognize her heroism." It was a lie, but a calculated one. Sarah's hand stilled on the coffee pot. I have work to finish, Sheriff. I'll help Sarah with the clearing," Martha offered, clearly pleased at the thought of her help receiving recognition. "You go on, dear." Trapped by social courtesy, Sarah set down the pot and moved to Seth's table like a woman walking to the gallows. He pulled out her chair, noting how she positioned herself to see both exits. "Coffee?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Please." He waited until she'd poured and seated herself, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Tell me about your husband, Mrs. Brennan." The cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "Thomas was a good man. Why do you ask?" "Thomas," Seth repeated thoughtfully. "Funny, Martha mentioned you called out for someone named Jake in your sleep." The color that had just returned to her cheeks fled again. That was my brother. Died when I was young. Sometimes the grief—" "Where did Thomas work his claim?" "Outside Prescott." The answer came too quickly, too practiced. "Which mine?" The Lucky Strike." Seth nodded slowly. The Lucky Strike had closed 5 years ago. He watched her realize her mistake, saw her pulse flutter at her throat like a trapped bird. "Mrs. Brennan," he said quietly. "I've been a lawman for 8 years. Before that, I served in the cavalry. I've learned to read people. And right now, you're scared to death. Not of me, but of something. Someone." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, he glimpsed the real woman beneath the facade, younger than she appeared, beautiful despite her attempts to hide it, and absolutely terrified. "I can't," she whispered. "Please, Sheriff, I'm no threat to your town. I just want to work and be left alone." "Are you Calla Monroe?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. She went still as stone, then lifted her chin with sudden dignity. "If I were Sheriff Rourke, would you shoot me here in front of Martha? Or wait until you could drag me to the street?" The defiance surprised him. as did the pain in her voice. "I enforce the law, ma'am, but I also seek truth. And the truth isn't always what the wanted posters say." She studied his face as if looking for deception. "The truth is a luxury I can't afford." Before he could respond, she stood abruptly. "If you're going to arrest me, do it. Otherwise, I have tables to clear." Seth watched her go, more puzzled than before. Her near confession should have simplified matters, but instead raised new questions. Why hadn't she denied it outright? Why stay in Dust Hollow if she knew he suspected? Over the following week, an unspoken tension stretched between them. Seth found reasons to patrol past the inn more frequently. Sarah, he still thought of her by that name, went about her work with quiet determination. But he caught her watching him through windows, her expression unreadable. The mystery deepened when he noticed her friendship with Lucy Palmer, the orphaned girl who swept shops for penny wages. Sarah had begun teaching the child to read using a borrowed Bible, spending her precious free time on the lessons. No hardened criminal's wife would waste effort on a throwaway child. Then came the night of the sandstorm. Seth had been checking on elderly residents when the wind picked up, bringing a wall of red dust that turned day to night. He'd just reached the widow Carson's place on the town's edge when he heard the bang of a loose shutter from the abandoned Hartley house next door. Knowing the storm could rip the shutter off and send it through someone's window, he fought his way to the derelict building. Inside, he found he wasn't alone. Sarah Brennan stood in the main room, having apparently taken shelter from the storm. The wind howled through gaps in the walls, and dust swirled in mini-cyclones across the floor. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, removing his bandana to shake off the dust. "Strange place to ride out a storm." "I was walking back from the cemetery," she said, and he heard truth in it. Visiting Thomas's marker. There was no Thomas Brennan in the cemetery. They both knew it. But something in her voice, a grief too real to be feigned, kept him from challenging the lie. The wind intensified, rattling the whole structure. A beam creaked ominously overhead. Without thinking, Seth grabbed Sarah and pulled her against the most solid wall just as a section of roof gave way, sending debris crashing where she'd been standing. They pressed together in the darkness, her body trembling against his. Not from cold, the desert heat remained trapped in the closed space, but from fear or shock or something else entirely. Seth became acutely aware of her warmth, the whiskey-brown eyes wide with more than terror, the soft breath against his neck. "You're safe," he murmured, though he wasn't sure which of them he was trying to convince. She lifted her face to his, and in the dim light filtering through the dust, he saw her armor crack. "I haven't been safe since I was 15 years old. Sheriff." The raw honesty of it hit him like a physical blow. His hand moved without his permission, brushing dust from her cheek. She closed her eyes at the touch, a single tear tracking through the dirt on her face. "What did he do to you?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Her eyes snapped open. "Who? Your husband? Jake Monroe?" She didn't deny it this time, just stared at him with those wounded eyes. "Everything," she whispered. "He did everything you can imagine and things you can't, and I let him, because the alternative was worse, because I was young and stupid and thought marriage to an outlaw was better than what I was running from." The building shook again. Seth pulled her closer, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest. He felt her tears through his shirt, hot as the desert wind. "But you know what the worst part is?" Her voice was muffled but clear. "I survived him. I survived it all. And now that he's dead, now that I'm finally free, I'm going to hang for his sins. The law you serve so faithfully will string me up for the crime of staying alive." Seth's arms tightened around her. Everything he believed in, everything he stood for, demanded he arrest this woman. She was wanted. She was the widow of his brother's killer. The law was clear, but the woman shaking in his arms wasn't the hardened criminal of the wanted posters. She was broken and brave and trying so hard to disappear that she was visible to anyone who truly looked. And Seth had been looking. God help him. He'd been unable to stop looking since that first day. The storm began to ease, but neither moved. In the artificial twilight of dust and darkness, boundaries blurred. Sheriff and outlaw became simply man and woman, both carrying scars, both far from home. "I won't hang," she said suddenly, pulling back to look at him. "I won't give them that satisfaction. If you're going to arrest me, know that I'll run. I'll fight. I'll make you shoot me before I'll let them put a rope around my neck. Then I won't arrest you," Seth heard himself say. She blinked, confused. "What?" "I'll investigate. I'll find the truth, all of it, and then we'll see what justice really looks like." Hope flickered in her eyes before she shuddered it away. "Men like you don't bend the law for women like me. Sheriff, you don't know what kind of man I am. Calla." Her real name on his lips changed something between them. The air grew thick with more than dust. She swayed toward him, and he met her halfway, drawn by forces stronger than law or logic. But at the last moment, she turned away. "Don't," she breathed. "Please, I can't owe you that too." Seth stepped back, understanding flooding through him. How many men had demanded payment from her body? How many times had survival meant surrender? He felt sick with rage. At Jake Monroe, at every man who'd seen her vulnerability as opportunity. "You owe me nothing," he said firmly. "Ever. Remember that." The storm had passed, leaving eerie quiet in its wake. They emerged from the ruined house separately, but the connection forged in darkness remained. Seth watched her hurry back to the inn, shoulders squared against whatever came next. He had work to do, wires to send, questions to ask, truth to uncover, because Calla Monroe deserved justice, not judgment. And perhaps, just perhaps, she deserved a chance at the freedom her husband's death should have brought. As for what Seth deserved, what he wanted with increasing desperation, that was a complication he couldn't afford to examine. Not yet. Not until he knew whether saving her meant destroying himself. Dreams haunted Calla's nights with increasing fury. Jake's laugh echoed through darkness, his phantom hands reaching for her throat while he whispered promises of what awaited traitors. She woke, gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of fear metallic on her tongue. Sometimes in those gray hours before dawn, she'd find herself at the window, searching the empty street below, certain his men had finally found her. 3 weeks had passed since the sandstorm. 3 weeks of Sheriff Rourke's careful distance and watchful eyes. He hadn't arrested her, but neither had he forgotten. She saw it in how he tracked her movements, in the questions he asked others about her. Martha had mentioned he'd sent several telegrams to unknown destinations. Calla knew he was investigating, pulling threads that might unravel everything. Yet, for all her fear, she couldn't leave. Lucy Palmer had become her anchor to humanity. The child's eager face during reading lessons reminded Calla that goodness still existed in the world. The girl had taken to letters like a desert flower to rain, and Calla found unexpected joy in her progress. "Miss Sarah," Lucy said one afternoon, sounding out words from the primer Calla had bought with precious wages. "Why don't you have any children?" The question cut deep. Calla's hand instinctively moved to her belly, remembering, sometimes God has different plans for us, sweetheart. Ma always said I was her blessing before she died. Maybe you'll get a blessing too. Calla smoothed the child's tangled hair. "You're blessing enough for me, Lucy girl." That evening, Martha approached her in the kitchen. "Sheriff wants to know if you'll join him for the town meeting tonight. Says there's something about organizing a school fund. Thought you might have interest given your work with Lucy." Calla's heart stuttered. A public meeting meant exposure, meant sitting among townsfolk who might recognize her from newer wanted posters. But refusing would seem suspicious, and Seth Rourke didn't make casual invitations. She arrived at the meeting hall to find it packed with residents. Seth stood near the front, his presence commanding even in civilian clothes. He caught her eye and nodded toward an empty chair beside him. The walk to that seat felt endless, dozens of eyes following her progress. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly as she sat. The meeting progressed with typical small-town business, disputes over water rights, plans for a harvest dance, arguments about repairing the church roof. Calla kept her head down, trying to remain invisible. Then Seth stood to address the crowd. Before we conclude, I want to discuss something close to many of our hearts: the education of our children. We have a dozen young ones in Dust Hollow with no formal schooling. I propose we establish a fund for a proper teacher and schoolhouse. Murmurs of approval rose from families with children. Seth continued. We're fortunate to have someone already demonstrating dedication to our youth. Mrs. Brennan has been teaching the Palmer girl to read without compensation. Perhaps she could share her thoughts on what our children need. Every eye turned to Calla. She felt trapped, pinned like a butterfly to a board, but Lucy's face beamed from across the room, pride shining in her eyes. For her, Calla stood. Education is hope, she said, voice starting soft but gaining strength. It's the ladder out of poverty, out of ignorance, out of... She paused, thinking of her own past. Out of circumstances that might otherwise trap us. Every child deserves that chance. Pretty words from a woman who appeared from nowhere, called out Josiah Mills, the bank owner. How do we know you're qualified to speak on education? What are your credentials, Mrs. Brennan? The challenge hung in the air. Calla lifted her chin. I had a governess until I was 14. Latin, French, mathematics, literature. My father believed in education for his daughters. Truth. Dangerous truth. But truth nonetheless. A governess? Mrs. Mills sniffed. How does a miner's wife afford such luxury in her youth? Seth stepped forward. Mrs. Brennan's past qualifications matter less than her present actions. She's proven her commitment. That's enough for me. His defense surprised her, warmed her, frightened her. After the meeting dissolved into smaller groups planning fundraising efforts, Calla tried to slip away. Seth caught her at the door. Walk with me, he said. Not quite a request, not quite an order. They strolled through empty streets, past closed shops and quiet homes. The full moon painted everything in silver and shadow. Neither spoke until they reached the path leading to the cemetery on the hill overlooking Dust Hollow. Why here? Calla asked. Neutral ground, and the view helps me think clearly. He gestured to the vista spread below, the sleeping town, the desert beyond, the ancient mesas standing sentinel. They found a flat rock and sat, careful space between them. Seth removed his hat, running fingers through dark hair. I've been investigating Jake Monroe's operations, the banks he robbed, the people he killed. My brother was one of them. Calla's breath caught. Seth, let me finish. His voice remained steady, but she heard the pain beneath. Samuel was 23, getting married in a month. He took the shotgun job to earn extra money for a house. Monroe's gang shot him in the back. He died, calling for our mother. Tears slipped down Calla's cheeks. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I know you are. That's what makes this complicated. He turned to face her. I've also been investigating you. Calla Tice, daughter of Judge Randolph Tice of San Francisco. Ran away at 15 when your father arranged a marriage to his colleague, a 50-year-old senator with certain proclivities toward young girls. She wrapped her arms around herself. You don't know what it was like. My father knew. He knew what that man was, and he sold me anyway for political favor. So you ran, and Jake Monroe found you in Sacramento, working in a boarding house, married you within a week. I was 16 and starving. He was handsome and dangerous and promised protection. I was too young to understand I was trading one prison for another. The words poured out like blood from a wound. But I never helped him rob those banks. Never held a gun or planned a job. I was just furniture. Something he owned, used, displayed when convenient. The wanted poster says conspiracy. Because I survived. Because I didn't die with him like a proper outlaw's wife should. Because someone needs to hang for all that blood. And I'm convenient. Seth studied her in the moonlight. What was in the saddlebag you took? The question she dreaded. Truth or lies? Looking into his storm-gray eyes, She found only truth would suffice. Evidence, documents linking territorial judges, senators, even a governor to Jake's operations. They funded him, protected him, shared in the profits. Jake kept records, insurance. He called it. Seth's whistle was low. Appreciative. That's why the price on your head is so high. You're not wanted for conspiracy. You're wanted for silence. Dead women tell no tales. They sat quietly, absorbing implications. Then Seth asked, "Where is it? The evidence? Safe, hidden, my insurance now. You could bargain with it, trade for amnesty." She laughed bitterly. "From the same men who want me dead, they'd promise anything, then arrange an accident. I've seen how Jake's associates handle loose ends." "What about federal authorities? This is bigger than territorial law." "Maybe. Or maybe the rot goes that deep, too. Who do I trust? Seth. Who in this world of men and laws and violence do I trust with my life?" The question hung between them like a living thing. Slowly, carefully, Seth reached for her hand. She let him take it, marveling at the gentleness in his calloused fingers. "You trust the man sitting beside you," he said simply. "Because I've had every legal reason to arrest you and haven't, because I know the difference between law and justice. Because..." He paused, struggling with words. "Because when I look at you, I see courage that humbles me. You survived hell and still teach children to read. You carry scars and still show kindness. You have every reason to run, and yet you stay." "I stay for Lucy," Calla whispered, but even she heard the lie in it. "You stay because something here calls to you. Same as me." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "I came to Dust Hollow running from grief, thinking justice would fill the hole Sam left. Instead, I found..." "What?" The word was barely breath. "Complications." But his eyes said more. They spoke of loneliness answered, of rigid beliefs shaken, of a heart waking from long sleep. Calla turned their joined hands, studying how they fit. "I'm poison. Seth, everything I touch turns to ash. You're a good man, an honest lawman. I won't be your destruction. Maybe I'm tired of being good. Maybe honest isn't the same as right." The space between them disappeared without either moving first. One moment they sat apart. The next, she was in his arms, months of tension snapping like overstretched wire. His kiss was desperate, seeking, full of questions her mouth answered with equal fervor. She'd been kissed before, taken, claimed, possessed, but this was different. Seth kissed like a man dying of thirst who'd found water, like salvation and damnation rolled into one. His hands tangled in her hair, and she made a sound that might have been sob or surrender. When they broke apart, breathing ragged, Calla felt exposed to her very soul. "We can't. This is madness." "Everything about you is madness," Seth said roughly. "But I've been sane my whole life. And where has it gotten me? Alone on a hill, falling for an outlaw's widow who might destroy everything I've built. Then let me go. Let me leave before..." He silenced her with another kiss, deeper, edged with possessiveness that should have frightened her but instead set her blood on fire. She responded with equal passion, pouring years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the connection between them. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, needing skin, needing proof this was real. He groaned against her mouth, pulling her onto his lap in a rustle of skirts and propriety abandoned. The moonlight turned everything silver, his chest beneath her palms, her hair spilling over his hands, the tears on both their faces. "Calla," he breathed against her throat, and she arched into him, every defense crumbling. But when his hands moved to the fastenings of her dress, she froze. Memory crashed over passion, Jake's rough hands, Jake's whiskey breath, Jake's weight pinning her down. She scrambled back, chest heaving, shame flooding through her. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I can't. I thought I could, but..." "Shh." Seth made no move to pursue, though she could see the effort it cost him. "It's all right. We have time." "Do we?" She laughed shakily, wrapping her arms around herself. "How much time does a wanted woman have with the sheriff who should arrest her?" As much as we choose to take, the simplicity of it broke something inside her. She crawled back into his arms, not for passion, but for comfort. He held her carefully, as if she might shatter, while she wept for everything lost and found and impossible to keep. They stayed on the hill until the eastern sky began to lighten, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. Seth told her about growing up in Kansas, about Sam's laugh, about why he'd chosen law over lawlessness when so many men went the other way. Calla shared memories of her mother, dead when she was 12, the only person who'd ever loved her unconditionally. As dawn approached, they walked back to town separately, maintaining the illusion of propriety, but everything had changed. The careful distance between them had collapsed, replaced by something dangerous and undeniable. At the inn's back door, Seth caught her hand once more. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, remember that. This isn't over." Calla nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She watched him walk away, badge glinting in the first rays of sun, and knew he was wrong. Everything ended. Jake had taught her that. Love, safety, hope, all of it turned to dust eventually. But for one night, she'd forgotten that lesson. For one night, she'd believed in possibilities beyond survival. Now daylight brought reality crashing back. She was still wanted, still hunted, still carrying secrets that could get them both killed. And Seth Rourke, for all his good intentions, couldn't change that with kisses and moonlight promises. But God help her, she wanted him to try. The morning after their night on the hill, Calla moved through her duties like a ghost. Every time the inn door opened, her heart jumped, expecting Seth with shackles or questions she couldn't answer. But he kept his distance, visible only through windows as he made his rounds. The normalcy felt wrong, like the calm before a tornado. Martha noticed her distraction. "You're pale as milk. Sarah, are you feeling poorly?" "Just tired. Ma'am, I didn't sleep well." "Bad dreams again." Martha's eyes were kind but knowing. "You can talk to me, child. Sometimes sharing the burden helps." Calla nearly laughed at the bitter irony. Share that she was wanted for conspiracy? That she'd spent the night in the sheriff's arms? That she was planning to run before her past caught up and destroyed everyone foolish enough to care for her? "Thank you," she said instead. "You've been nothing but kind to me." That afternoon, while serving lunch to traveling merchants, Calla's blood froze. A man at the corner table wasn't eating, just watching her with pale eyes that stirred ugly memories. She knew that face. Elias Cord, one of Jake's lieutenants, the last time she'd seen him. He'd been dividing stolen money while Jake beat a man to death for skimming. She forced herself to pour coffee steadily, to smile at other customers, to pretend her world hadn't just tilted off its axis. Cord made no move to approach, content to observe. The message was clear. He'd found her, and he was deciding what to do about it. When her shift ended, Calla slipped out the back door, circling through alleys toward the stables. She had to get to the hidden saddlebag, had to run before... "Going somewhere. Mrs. Monroe?" Cord stepped from the shadows, blocking her path. Up close, she could smell the tobacco and whiskey, see the calculating cruelty in his eyes. "You're mistaken," she said, proud when her voice didn't shake. "My name is Sarah Brennan?" His laugh was ugly. "Sure it is. Just like Jake's really dead and not hiding out in Mexico waiting for his loving wife to bring him his retirement fund." The words hit like a physical blow. "Jake's dead. I saw his body." "Did you? Or did you see what he wanted you to see?" Cord moved closer, backing her against the stable wall. "Either way, doesn't matter to me. What matters is what you took. Hand it over, and maybe I'll let you walk away." "I don't know what you're talking about." His hand shot out, gripping her throat. Not tight enough to cut off air, but tight enough to prove he could. "Don't play games. Calla, Jake always said you were too smart for your own good. Prove him wrong. Give me the documents." "I don't have them," she gasped. Truth. They were buried 2 miles outside town. Then get them. You have until tomorrow night. Meet me at Skeleton Ridge, alone. Try to run. Try to get help, and I'll burn this worthless town to ash, starting with that little orphan brat you've gotten attached to." He released her and walked away, whistling. Calla slumped against the wall, hand at her throat, mind racing. Jake alive? It seemed impossible, but then she'd never actually seen the body up close. The marshals had identified him, but marshals could be bought like anyone else. She stumbled back to the inn, Cord's threats echoing in her ears. In her room, she splashed water on her face and tried to think. If she ran now, he'd follow through on his promise. "Lucy, Martha, the whole town would suffer for her selfishness." But if she gave him the documents, her only insurance would be gone. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. She opened the door to find Seth, still in uniform, but with worry etched in every line of his face. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here. Too many years." She followed him through dark streets to his office, where he locked the door and pulled the shades. In the lamplight, she saw the tension in his shoulders, the grim set of his jaw. "Elias Cord registered at the hotel an hour ago," he said without preamble. "Used a false name, but I recognized him from the wanted posters. He's one of Monroe's top men." "I know." The words escaped before she could stop them. Seth's eyes sharpened. "He approached you?" There was no point in lying now. "He wants the documents. Gave me until tomorrow night to deliver them, or—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't voice the threats against Lucy. "Or he'll retaliate against the town." Seth's hands clenched into fists. Typical outlaw logic. Threaten the innocent to control the guilty. "I'm not innocent," Calla said quietly. "And I won't let others pay for my sins. I'll give him what he wants and leave. Like hell you will." The vehemence in his voice startled her. "You think I'll let you walk into certain death? He won't let you live. Calla, you know too much." "Then what do you suggest? Arrest him? On what grounds? Arrest me? That solves nothing except to put a target on this entire town." Seth paced the small office like a caged wolf. "There's another option. We could set a trap. Use the meeting to capture Cord. Get him to reveal who else is involved." "We?" Calla laughed bitterly. "There is no we. Sheriff, you're a lawman. I'm a wanted woman. Whatever happened last night doesn't change that." He stopped pacing, fixing her with intense gray eyes. "Everything about last night changes that." The weight of his words settled over her. She sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "Seth, please, don't make this harder than it is. Let me handle Cord my way. Let me protect the people who've shown me kindness." "By sacrificing yourself?" He knelt before her chair, taking her hands. "Calla, listen to me. I've spent all day thinking about this, about you, about what's right versus what's legal. I sent more telegrams this morning to federal marshals I trust, men who served with me in the cavalry. There's a way through this that doesn't end with you dead or in chains." Hope, that dangerous emotion she'd thought beaten out of her, stirred in her chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that corruption runs deep, but not all the way through. There are honest men who'd be very interested in documents proving territorial officials are funding outlaws. Men who could offer you protection in exchange for testimony. Witness protection doesn't exist yet. Seth, they'd use me and discard me. Not if you had someone vouching for you, someone with a reputation for honesty." His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Calla jerked back, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, steadier now. "A sheriff's wife has certain protections. It would be harder for them to make you disappear, harder to dismiss your testimony, and—" his voice roughened. "It would give me the right to protect you that I want anyway." "Seth, you can't be serious. You barely know me. I'm wanted. I'm damaged. I'm the woman I can't stop thinking about." He interrupted. "The woman who haunts my dreams and makes me question everything I thought I knew about justice. I'm not saying it would be simple or safe, but I'm saying I want to try." Tears blurred her vision. You'd throw away your reputation, your career, everything you've built, for a woman you've known a few weeks. I'd trade it all for the chance to see you free, he said simply. To see you without fear in your eyes, to give you the life Jake Monroe stole from you. She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted to believe in his fairy tale, where love conquered law and happiness was possible. But Cord's threats echoed in her mind. Even if I agreed, she said carefully, it doesn't solve the immediate problem. Cord wants those documents tomorrow night. Then we'll give them to him. Or rather, we'll make him think we are. Seth rose, moving to his desk. I've dealt with men like Cord before. They're brutal, but not particularly clever. We can use that. You have a plan. The beginning of one. But I need you to trust me. Completely. He turned back to her. Can you do that? Can you put your life in my hands? Looking at him, this good, stubborn, foolishly brave man, Calla realized she already had. From the moment he'd chosen justice over law, her life had been bound to his whether she admitted it or not. All right, she whispered. Tell me what you need me to do. They spent the next hour planning, Seth sketching maps of Skeleton Ridge and its surroundings while Calla provided details about Cord's habits and weaknesses. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was action instead of reaction. For the first time since Jake's death, she felt like more than prey. As midnight approached, Seth walked her back to the inn, both aware this might be their last peaceful moment together. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said at the back door, I want you to know. Last night meant everything to me. You gave me something I thought I'd never have again. What's that? Hope. She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. Thank you for that gift, even if it's all we get. He caught her before she could slip inside, pulling her close. This isn't goodbye, Calla. This is see you tomorrow, when all this is over and we can start fresh. She nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. Let him believe in tomorrow. Let one of them have faith enough for both. Inside her room, Calla sat at the small desk and wrote 2 letters by candlelight. The first was to Lucy, enclosed with every cent she'd saved, instructions for the child to use it for education. The second was longer, harder, a full confession of everything she knew about Jake's operations. Every name, every crime, every drop of blood on territorial hands. If tomorrow went badly, at least the truth would survive. She sealed both letters and hid them beneath a loose floorboard. Then she cleaned her derringer, a wedding gift from Jake that had become her only friend through years of marriage. Tomorrow she'd face the past that refused to stay buried. But tonight, she allowed herself to dream of a future where Seth's badge could shield instead of threaten, where love might actually be stronger than law, where a woman could shed her sins like old skin and emerge clean. It was a beautiful dream. She only prayed she'd live to see if it could become reality. The gunfire at Skeleton Ridge echoed across the desert like thunder. Calla pressed her back against a boulder. Derringer clutched in trembling hands as Cord's men spread out to flank their position. Seth's plan had gone sideways the moment they arrived, instead of Cord alone. 6 riders had been waiting in ambush. Stay down, Seth shouted, returning fire from behind an outcropping 20 feet away. His rifle cracked repeatedly, forcing their attackers to take cover. Calla's shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed it during the initial volley. Blood seeped through her dress, but adrenaline kept the pain at bay. She'd walked into this trap with eyes open, fake documents in her saddlebag, hoping to buy time for Seth's backup to arrive. But either the federal marshals were late or they weren't coming at all. Where are they, Calla? Cord's voice carried across the rocks. The real papers. You think I'm stupid enough to fall for forgeries? She squeezed her eyes shut. How had he known? Who had betrayed them? A figure moved in her peripheral vision, one of Cord's men creeping closer. Without thinking, she fired. The Derringer's pop was almost lost in the larger battle, but the man cried out and stumbled back. That's my girl, she heard Jake's voice whisper, and her blood turned to ice. No, Jake was dead. It was just her mind playing tricks under stress. Seth made a break for her position, diving and rolling as bullets sparked off rocks. He landed beside her, breathing hard, a cut on his cheek trickling blood. "You hit?" he asked, then saw her shoulder. His face darkened. "Damn it, Calla." "I'm fine. Seth, they knew about the fake documents. Someone told them. Worry about that later. Right now. We need to—" A new sound cut through the gunfire. Horses approaching fast. Seth raised his rifle, then lowered it as a dozen riders appeared, badges glinting in the late afternoon sun. Federal marshals. Finally. "You, some marshals," the lead rider bellowed. "Drop your weapons or be shot down!" Cord's men scattered like rats, some trying to flee, others making a final stand. The ridge erupted in chaos as the marshals engaged. Seth pulled Calla behind better cover, shielding her with his body as the battle raged. It ended as suddenly as it began. 3 of Cord's men lay dead, 2 captured, but Cord himself had vanished in the confusion, leaving only dust and blood behind. Marshal Thomas Brennan, no relation to Calla's assumed name, surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. "Sheriff Rourke, ma'am, sorry we're late. Had some trouble finding the ridge." Seth helped Calla to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "Cord escaped. We'll track him, right now. Let's get Mrs. Monroe somewhere safe. We need her statement, and that shoulder needs tending." The ride back to Dust Hollow passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. Doc Winters cleaned and bandaged Calla's wound while she sat in Seth's office, surrounded by federal marshals who asked question after question. She told them everything, about Jake, about the corruption, about where the real documents were hidden. "You're willing to testify to all this in federal court?" Marshal Brennan asked. "Yes." Her voice was steady, despite her exhaustion. "Every word. That's brave of you, ma'am. Also dangerous. The men you're accusing have long reaches and deep pockets, which is why she needs protection." Seth interjected. "Federal protection." Brennan studied them both, noting Seth's protective stance, Calla's trust in him. "I can offer protective custody until the trial. After that," he shrugged. "Budget's tight. Best I could do is relocate her somewhere quiet. Maybe back east. That won't be necessary," Seth said firmly. "She'll have protection here. All due respect, Sheriff, but Dust Hollow can't stand against the kind of men who'll want her dead. Dust Hollow won't have to. Just one stubborn lawman who knows every rock and shadow for 50 miles around." Seth's hand found Calla's uninjured shoulder. "She stays with me." Calla looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. "Seth, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He turned to Brennan. "How soon can you arrange for a judge? A real one, not one of the corrupt bastards you'll be arresting. Judge Fletcher's circuit brings him through Prescott next week. He's as honest as they come." "Why?" "Because I want this done legal and proper. Calla Monroe's going to be Calla Rourke by the time she testifies. Let them try to make a sheriff's wife disappear without raising hell." The room went silent. Brennan's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. The other marshals exchanged glances. Calla felt her heart stop, then restart at double speed. "Is that a proposal, Sheriff?" Brennan asked with dry humor. "Already proposed, just waiting on the lady's answer." Seth knelt beside her chair, taking her hand. "I know this isn't the romantic moment you deserve, but I meant what I said last night. Marry me. Calla, let me give you my name, my protection, my life, such as it is." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Around them, hardened Lawman suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. "I'm trouble," she whispered. "I'll always be trouble. Good thing I'm a lawman, then. Handling trouble is what I do best. They'll come for me, for us. Let them come. I've faced worse odds for worse reasons." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Say yes. Calla, choose hope over fear. Choose us." Looking into his storm-gray eyes, she saw her future, not easy, not safe, but real and possible, and hers for the taking. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Seth, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent. mindful of their audience and her injuries. Someone cleared their throat, and they broke apart, both flushing. "Well then," Marshal Brennan said, fighting a smile. "Guess we'd better retrieve those documents and start cleaning house. Mrs. Monroe, soon to be Mrs. Rourke, we'll need you to stay in protective custody until the judge arrives." "She stays at the inn," Seth countered. "I'll post guards, federal and local. Anyone wants to hurt her goes through both." They negotiated terms while Doc Winters returned to check Cala's bandages. The old man winked at her. About time Seth found himself a wife. Town's been taking bets on when he'd notice what was right in front of him. That night, Cala lay in her narrow bed at the inn, 2 marshals outside her door and Seth's deputy below her window. Everything had changed in a span of hours. She was no longer running, no longer alone. The weight of it, the terrible, wonderful reality, made her chest tight. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's me." Seth's voice came through the door. The marshals let him pass. He entered carrying a tray of food and wearing civilian clothes, looking younger and somehow vulnerable without his badge. "Martha insisted you eat," he said, setting the tray on her bedside table. "How's the shoulder?" "Sore but manageable." She studied his face, noting the exhaustion there. "You should rest too." "Can't sleep." He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to crowd her. "Keep thinking about how close I came to losing you today." "But you didn't." "Almost did, when I saw the blood." He shook his head. "I've been shot at before. Cala faced down killers and never flinched. But seeing you hurt, knowing you were in danger because of my plan, it about broke me." She reached for his hand. "The plan worked. We exposed them, got the marshals involved. It's over." "Not over, just beginning." He lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles. "I want you to know something. This isn't just about protection. When I asked you to marry me, it wasn't some noble sacrifice. I'm selfish enough to want you for myself, danger and all." The confession warmed her more than any fire could. "I'm not an easy woman to love. Seth, I have nightmares. I flinch at shadows. I may never be able to give you children after what Jake—" She couldn't finish. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for real. For someone who looks at me and sees more than a badge. For a partner who's survived hell and still chooses kindness." He cupped her face gently. "I'm asking for you, Cala, exactly as you are." She leaned into his touch, letting herself believe. "I never thought I'd have this. A good man. A real chance at happiness. I don't know how to be a wife anymore. Not a real one. Then we'll learn together, day by day, year by year. No expectations except honesty." A commotion outside broke the moment. Shouts. Running feet. Marshal Brennan's voice raised in command. Seth was at the door instantly, hand on his gun. "What's happening?" he demanded. One of the marshals stuck his head in. "Cord's been spotted at the saloon, drunk and talking wild about Jake Monroe being alive and coming for his wife." Cala's blood chilled. "Seth, stay here," he ordered, then was gone. She counted heartbeats, listening to the distant sounds of pursuit. The marshals outside her door shifted nervously. Then, like a nightmare made real, she heard it, Jake's whistle, the same tuneless melody he'd always used to announce his return. It came from inside the room. She turned slowly, derringer appearing in her hand as if by magic. The window stood open, curtains billowing, and there, stepping from the shadows, was the ghost of her husband. Except Jake Monroe was very much alive. "Hello, darling," he said, smiling that cruel smile she knew so well. "Miss me?" The scream lodged in her throat. He looked different, thinner, scarred, a wildness in his eyes that spoke of months in hiding. But it was undeniably Jake. "You're dead," she whispered. You saw what I wanted you to see. Amazing what a little money and a corpse about my size can accomplish." He moved closer, and she raised the derringer. He laughed. "You won't shoot me, Cala. You never could. Too soft, too weak." Though I hear you've been playing house with the local sheriff. That's going to have to stop. Get out. Her voice grew stronger. Get out or I'll scream. Go ahead. By the time they break down that door, you'll be gone, one way or another. His hand moved to his gun. See, I've been patient. Calla. Waited while you played your games. Gathered my boys. Made my plans. But now it's time to go. You've got something I need. And we've got unfinished business. I'm not going anywhere with you? No. His gun cleared leather, pointed at her heart. Then I guess I'll have to settle for killing you and finding those documents myself. After I pay a visit to that little orphan you're so fond of. What's her name? Lucy. Rage, pure and hot, flooded through her. This man had taken everything. Her innocence, her freedom, her hope. He would not take Lucy too. You're right, she said quietly. I couldn't shoot you before. I was too weak. That's my girl. Now put down the, but I'm not that girl anymore. She fired. Once, twice, the derringer speaking her years of pain. Jake's eyes widened in shock as red bloomed across his chest. He staggered, gun dropping from nerveless fingers. You shot me, he gasped, disbelief coloring his final words. Yes, Calla said simply. I did. Jake Monroe crumpled to the floor, truly dead this time. The door burst open, marshals flooding in with guns drawn. Seth pushed through them, taking in the scene, the open window, the dead man. Calla standing with smoking gun and steel in her spine. Calla? His voice was careful, gentle. He's dead, she said, remarkably calm. He's finally dead. Then the derringer slipped from her fingers, and she collapsed. Seth caught her, holding her as the shaking started, as the tears came, as years of fear poured out in wrenching sobs. It's over, he murmured against her hair. It's over, sweetheart. You're safe. You're free. Dawn broke over Dust Hollow to find the town in chaos. Word of the midnight shootout had spread like wildfire. And by first light, a crowd had gathered outside the inn. Some came out of curiosity, others from genuine concern for the woman they'd come to know as Sarah Brennan. Inside, Marshal Brennan finished his preliminary investigation while Calla sat wrapped in a blanket, Seth's arm around her shoulders. She'd told her story 3 times now, each telling draining more energy from her already depleted reserves. Self-defense, clear as day. Brennan concluded, closing his notebook. Man broke into your room armed, threatened you and a child. No jury in the territory would convict. Hell, they'd probably give you a medal. I don't want a medal, Calla said quietly. I just want it to be over. The documents, Brennan prompted gently. 2 miles north, base of Cathedral Rock. There's a distinctive formation, 3 rocks leaning together like praying hands, buried beneath. Brennan nodded to his men, who departed immediately. We'll have them within the hour. Then the real work begins. Taking down the men who funded Monroe's operations won't be easy, but with your testimony and those papers, she's told you enough for now. Seth interrupted. She needs rest, as if to emphasize his point. The door burst open and Lucy Palmer rushed in, tears streaming down her face. She'd escaped from Mrs. Hensley's protective custody the moment she heard about the shooting. Miss Sarah, the girl flung herself at Calla, small arms wrapping tight. They said you were hurt. They said a bad man came. I'm all right, sweetheart, Calla soothed, stroking the child's hair despite the pain in her shoulder. The bad man can't hurt anyone anymore. Is he the one who gave you nightmares? Trust a child to see to the heart of things. Yes, but he's gone now. The nightmares will fade. Martha Hensley appeared in the doorway, breathless from chasing Lucy. Land's sakes, child, you can't just run off. She took in the scene. Marshals, Seth, Calla pale but alive. Oh, my dear, what you must have endured. The crowd outside grew louder, voices raised in discussion. Through the window, Calla could see people she'd served, smiled at, slowly befriended. They didn't look angry or afraid. They looked protective. Sheriff, Deputy Harrison appeared. Folks are getting restless. They want to know what's happening, if the town's in danger. Seth stood. I'll talk to them. We'll talk to them, Calla corrected, getting to her feet despite his protest. They deserve to hear the truth from me. Calla, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've hidden behind lies long enough. They walked out together, Calla leaning on Seth's arm. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on her. She recognized faces, the baker who always saved her fresh bread, the schoolmaster she discussed books with, the ranch hands who tipped their hats when she passed. My name, she began, voice carrying clear in the morning air, is Calla Monroe, not Sarah Brennan. I've been living a lie since I came here, and you deserve to know why. She told them everything, her forced marriage, the years of abuse, Jake's crimes, her flight to Dust Hollow seeking safety. With each word, she felt weights lifting from her soul. These people had shown her kindness when she had no right to expect it. They deserved honesty in return. I brought danger to your town, she concluded. I'm sorry for that, but I want you to know that every smile, every kind word you gave to a stranger, they saved me. You showed me there were still good people in this world. Whatever happens next, I'm grateful for that gift. Silence stretched. Then Widow Carson, all 4 feet 11 inches of her, pushed to the front. So what if your name's different? She declared. You're the same woman who sat with me through my pneumonia, same one who taught Lucy her letters. Name don't change that. That's right. Tom Patterson, the blacksmith, called out. You helped birth my son when Doc was drunk. Don't matter to me what you were before. One by one, voices rose in support. Not all. Some faces showed suspicion or disapproval. But enough. More than enough. Calla felt tears threaten again. But these were different. These were tears of belonging. Furthermore, Martha Hensley announced, anybody tries to cause trouble for our Sarah, Calla, well, they'll answer to me. And my shotgun. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Seth raised his hand for silence. Folks, I appreciate your support. You should also know that Miss Monroe here has agreed to become my wife, so anyone thinking of causing trouble will answer to the law as well as Martha's shotgun. This generated considerably more excitement. Congratulations mixed with good-natured ribbing about the sheriff finally settling down. In the midst of it all, Calla felt something she'd never expected. Acceptance. Not despite her past, but regardless of it. The crowd eventually dispersed, people returning to their daily lives with new gossip to share. But several lingered. Women who caught Calla's hand and whispered their own stories of survival. Men who nodded respectfully to Seth and pledged their support if needed. By noon, Marshal Brennan's men had returned with the saddlebags. The documents were all there, damning in their detail. Names, dates, amounts, connections. A web of corruption stretching from territorial judges to banking officials. This is big, Brennan said, studying the papers. Bigger than we thought. I need to wire Washington immediately. We'll need more men, more resources. How long before trials? Seth asked. Months, maybe a year. These men have money for good lawyers, but with Calla's testimony and these documents... He looked at her. You realize you'll need to appear in court? Face these men? I faced Jake. I can face them. That's my girl, Seth murmured, and the pride in his voice warmed her more than whiskey ever could. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Statements were finalized, documents cataloged, security measures discussed. Through it all, Calla noticed the change in how people treated her. The marshals showed respect rather than suspicion. Martha fussed over her like a mother hen. Even Doc Winters, gruff as always, patted her good shoulder and declared her tough as old boot leather and twice as valuable. As evening fell, Seth finally managed to extract her from the chaos. They walked slowly through town, her arm through his, watching shadows lengthen across familiar streets. Regrets? He asked. About shooting Jake? Never, she considered. About lying to everyone? Yes, but I did what I had to for survival. People understand that. Most of them. Anyway, they'd reached the church. its white walls glowing in the sunset. Calla stopped, studying the simple building where she'd sat in back pews, praying for invisibility. "I want to be married here," she said suddenly. "Not in Prescott with strangers. Here, where people know me, the real me." Judge Fletcher might agree to that. Martha would certainly prefer it. She's already planning the reception. Calla laughed, the sound still rusty from disuse, but genuine. "Poor Seth. You're marrying not just an outlaw's widow, but the whole town's adopted daughter." "I'm marrying the bravest woman I know," he corrected, turning her to face him. "A woman who survived hell and came out kind, who protected others even when she couldn't protect herself, who looked evil in the eye and refused to let it win. I'm also marrying the most honorable man I know," she replied softly. "A man who chose justice over law, who saw past the wanted posters to the woman beneath, who offered his name and protection to someone the world said didn't deserve it." He kissed her then, there in front of the church with half the town probably watching from windows. It was a promise, a claiming, a declaration that Calla Munro would never stand alone again. That night, there was an impromptu celebration at the inn. Nothing fancy. Martha's good stew, Tom Patterson's fiddle, stories and laughter that ran late. Calla found herself at the center of it, no longer the mysterious widow, but simply one of them. When Lucy fell asleep in her lap, small body, trusting and warm, she felt the last of her walls crumble. "You look happy," Seth observed, finding her in a quiet corner as the party wound down. "I am," she realized with some surprise. "Despite everything, Jake, the shooting, what's coming with the trials, I'm happy. Is that wrong?" "That's human. That's healing." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "That's what you deserve." Marshal Brennan approached, hat in hand. "Sorry to interrupt. My men are pulling out at first light, but I'll leave 2 deputies for security until the judge arrives. Week from now, you'll be a married woman, Mrs. Munro. Then we'll head to Prescott to start building our case." "Thank you, Marshal, for everything." He tipped his hat. "Thank you. Ma'am, what you're doing takes real courage. These documents will help clean up the territory, make it safer for decent folks. That's worth protecting." After he left, Calla leaned into Seth's solid presence. A week, 7 days until she'd be Calla Rourke, with all the protection and belonging that name implied. 7 days to prepare for the battles ahead. But tonight, surrounded by unexpected friends, with Lucy warm in her lap and Seth's arm around her shoulders, she felt ready for whatever came next. Jake was dead, truly dead this time. The past could no longer reach out with cruel hands to drag her back. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new hope. And hope, Calla had learned, was the strongest weapon of all. The town hall filled to capacity for the emergency meeting. Word had spread that Judge Fletcher would arrive within days, and the good citizens of Dust Hollow had gathered to hear Sheriff Rourke make his case. Calla sat in the front row between Martha and Lucy, trying to ignore the weight of dozens of eyes on her back. Seth stood before them all, badge gleaming, authority radiating from every line of his body, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, knew this moment mattered more than any gunfight. "Folks," he began, "you've all heard the rumors, seen the federal marshals, know something big happened. I'm here to tell you plain, Calla Munro saved this town from becoming a battleground." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Seth raised his hand for silence. Jake Munro's gang had plans for Dust Hollow. Documents we recovered show they intended to use our town as a base for territorial expansion. The only reason they didn't is because his widow chose to stand against them instead of with them. She brought trouble here. Josiah Mills, the banker, called out, "My family could have been killed." "Your family was already in danger," Seth countered. "Munro's men were coming whether Calla was here or not. Difference is, with her here, we had warning, we had evidence, we had someone brave enough to face them down. She lied to us," Mrs. Mills added, chin raised in righteous indignation, "lived among us under false pretenses." Before Seth could respond, Calla stood. The room fell silent. "You're right," she said clearly. "I lied. I came here running from a life of violence, and yes, I brought echoes of that violence with me. But I also brought the means to end it. Those documents don't just implicate dead outlaws. They name living men who've been stealing from you for years." She turned to face the crowd fully. "Mr. Mills, did you never wonder why your bank was forced to charge such high interest? Why territorial taxes took so much but returned so little? The men named in those papers, judges, tax collectors, even a territorial governor, they've been bleeding honest folks dry to fund outlaws like my late husband." "That's a serious accusation." Mills sputtered. "It's not an accusation. It's evidence. Black and white proof that will see them tried in federal court." She met his eyes steadily. "Your bank lost money to these men. Mr. Mills, my testimony might see some of it returned." That changed the atmosphere. Greed, Calla had learned, could overcome prejudice faster than any appeal to compassion. "What about the danger?" another voice called. "What if more outlaws come seeking revenge?" Seth took over again. "That's why I'm asking for your support. A sheriff protects his town, but a town protects its own. Calla Monroe is one of ours now. When she testifies, when she stands up in federal court to face down powerful men, she does it for all of us. The least we can do is stand with her here. She's marrying you for protection," someone suggested. "Using you." The word stung. But before Calla could respond, Lucy Palmer jumped to her feet. "That's not true," the child declared with all the fierce certainty of youth. "Miss Calla loves Sheriff Seth. I seen how she looks at him when she thinks nobody's watching. Like he hung the moon just for her." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Out of the mouths of babes, Calla thought, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "The point remains," Seth said, fighting a smile. "Calla needs our protection. Yes, but we need her courage. How many of us would have stood up to Jake Monroe? How many would have risked everything to see justice done?" "I would." Tom Patterson rumbled. "Any man threatens my family. I'd fight." "Would you testify against territorial governors?" Seth challenged. "Would you sit in a courtroom and name names, knowing those men have money and reach and long memories?" Silence answered him. "That's what Calla's doing. That's the risk she's taking. Not for money or fame or even safety, for justice, for the hope that maybe the territory can be cleaned up enough that our children grow up in a better world." Old Sam Washington, who'd prospected these hills for 40 years, stood slowly. "I remember when Jake Monroe's gang hit the Stewart Ranch, killed Stewart, left his wife and young'uns with nothing. If this woman's testimony can see justice for them and others like them, she has my support." One by one, others stood. The seamstress whose nephew had been killed in a stage robbery. The ranch foreman who'd lost cattle to territorial taxes that funded outlaws. Even some who'd been skeptical began to nod, seeing their own grievances reflected in Calla's fight. All in favor of supporting Mrs. Monroe, soon to be Mrs. Rourke in her pursuit of justice. Seth called for a vote. The ayes overwhelmed the nays, though Calla noted who remained silent: the Mills family. Predictably, a few others who valued stability over justice, but the majority stood with her, and that was more than she'd dared hope. After the meeting dissolved, people approached her differently than before, not with suspicion or mere kindness, but with solidarity. They shared their own stories of loss to corruption, thanked her for her courage, promised support in small but meaningful ways. "Didn't expect that, did you?" Seth murmured, finding her during a quiet moment. "I expected to be run out of town," she admitted. "Or worse. You underestimate the power of truth. These people know what it's like to be stepped on by powerful men. You're giving them hope that it doesn't have to stay that way." That night, unable to sleep, Calla found herself writing in the journal she'd started. Not a confession this time, but observations. How Tom Patterson had offered to stand guard during the trial. How Widow Carson had pressed a small gold cross into her palm for protection. How even Banker Mills had pulled Seth aside to discuss possibly testifying about irregular territorial audits. A soft knock interrupted her writing. "It's Martha," came the whisper. Calla opened the door to find her employer-turned-friend holding a bundle of fabric. Couldn't sleep either, Martha admitted. Thought you might need this. She unwrapped the bundle to reveal a dress, ivory silk with delicate embroidery, obviously precious and carefully preserved. It was my daughter's, Martha said softly. She died of fever before she could wear it to her own wedding. Been saving it these 15 years, waiting for the right woman. Want you to have it. Martha, I couldn't. Yes, you can. You gave me purpose again. Calla, watching you heal, seeing you with Lucy, helping you find your strength. It's like having my girl back in some small way. Tears glittered in the older woman's eyes. Wear it when you marry Seth. Bring some joy to it at last. They embraced, two women who'd known loss finding comfort in shared understanding. After Martha left, Calla hung the dress carefully, touching the fine fabric with reverent fingers. She'd expected to marry Seth in her best everyday dress, practical and forgettable. This gift transformed it into something more, a celebration, a new beginning, a promise of beauty after ashes. The next morning brought a telegram that changed everything. Marshal Brennan had reached Prescott only to find several of the named officials had fled. Worse, word had leaked about Calla's testimony. The federal judge had received death threats. 2 potential witnesses had disappeared. They're scared, Seth said grimly, reading the message aloud. Scared people do desperate things. Should we postpone the wedding? Calla asked, though the thought hurt. No, if anything, we move it up. Judge Fletcher arrives tomorrow. We'll marry immediately. The sooner you have legal protection, the better. The town mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Women descended on the church with flowers and ribbons. Men reinforced security points and established watch rotations. Even the children contributed, Lucy organizing them to sweep the church steps and polish the pews. That evening, Calla stood before the mirror in Martha's dress, hardly recognizing herself. The ivory silk transformed her from fugitive to bride. Martha had pinned her hair up with borrowed combs, and Widow Carson's cross rested at her throat. You look beautiful, Lucy breathed from the doorway. Like a princess in the stories. No princess, Calla corrected gently. Just a woman who got very lucky. Sheriff Seth's the lucky one, Lucy declared with certainty that made Calla laugh. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see riders approaching. Not the judge's party, but rough men with hard faces. Calla's blood chilled as she recognized some of them. Jake's extended network, come to prevent her testimony the only way they knew how. Lucy, run to the sheriff's office. Tell him. Gunfire erupted before she could finish. The child fled as Calla grabbed her derringer. Wedding dress be damned. She'd come too far to let Jake's legacy destroy her happiness now. The battle for Dust Hollow had begun. From her window, she could see it all unfold. Seth and his deputies had been ready. Taking defensive positions throughout town, the federal marshals Brennan had left behind joined the fight. But the outlaws had numbers and desperation on their side. Then something extraordinary happened. Tom Patterson emerged from his smithy with a rifle. Doc Winters appeared on his porch, medical bag in one hand, pistol in the other, one by one. The citizens of Dust Hollow joined the fight. Not all were skilled fighters, but they were determined. This was their town. These were their people, and they would not yield. Calla couldn't stay hidden, not when others risked everything for her. She made her way downstairs, staying low, reaching the back door just as an outlaw tried to break through. Her derringer spoke twice, and he fell. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. When the smoke cleared, 3 outlaws lay dead, 5 captured, the rest fleeing into the desert. Dust Hollow had held, but victory came with cost. Tom Patterson nursed a wounded arm. Deputy Harrison had taken a bullet to the leg. And Seth. Calla found him slumped against the jail wall, blood seeping between the fingers pressed to his side. No, she breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. No, Seth, you can't. Just a graze, he said through gritted teeth. Doc's seen worse. Doc Winters appeared as if summoned, taking charge with practiced efficiency. Clean through. Missed anything vital. Boy's too stubborn to die anyway. As Doc worked, Seth caught Calla's hand. Nice dress. He managed. Shame about the blood. She looked down to find the ivory silk stained crimson where she'd knelt. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters except... I'm not dying. Calla, not when we're this close. His grip tightened. Judge Fletcher's party was spotted 5 miles out. We're getting married tomorrow if I have to stand at that altar held up by fence posts. Through tears, she laughed. Stubborn man. Stubborn woman. Good match. Around them, Dust Hollow tended its wounds and counted its victory. The citizens had faced down professional outlaws and won. More importantly, they'd done it together, united by purpose and community. As stars began to appear overhead, Calla sat with Seth while Doc finished bandaging him. Tomorrow would bring a wedding and new challenges. The trials still loomed. Danger still lurked. But tonight, Dust Hollow had proven something important. Sometimes, ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Sometimes, a town could become a family. Sometimes, love and justice could triumph over violence and greed. The war wasn't over, but this battle, this crucial battle, belonged to them. 6 months had passed since the wedding in Dust Hollow's bullet-scarred church. Judge Fletcher had performed the ceremony with Seth standing straight despite his bandages, and Calla wearing Martha's blood-stained dress like a badge of honor. The whole town had turned out, transforming what might have been a moment of fear into one of triumph. Now, Calla stood in a courtroom in Denver, far from the desert she'd come to call home. The federal trial had been moved here for security, away from the reach of territorial corruption. She smoothed her simple gray dress, appropriate for a sheriff's wife testifying against powerful men, and met the eyes of those who'd profited from blood. State your name for the record. The prosecutor instructed. Calla Monroe Rourke, she said clearly, claiming both her past and present. For 3 days, she testified. Every detail, every name, every crime she'd witnessed or learned about through Jake's meticulous records. The defense attorneys tried to break her, painting her as a bitter widow, a manipulative woman, an unreliable witness tainted by association. But Calla had survived Jake Monroe. These men in their fine suits were nothing compared to that devil. You expect this court to believe, one lawyer sneered, that a simple woman understood these complex financial arrangements? I expect this court to believe the documents, Calla replied evenly, written in these men's own hands. As for being simple, surviving 5 years with Jake Monroe required understanding exactly how money and violence flowed through the territory. Simple women don't live long in that world. When it was over, when the guilty verdicts rang through the courtroom like church bells, Calla finally allowed herself to breathe. Not all the conspirators had been caught. Some had fled to Mexico or parts unknown, but the network was broken. The territory could begin to heal. Outside the courthouse, Seth waited with open arms. He'd insisted on making the dangerous journey despite her protests, wearing his badge like armor against any who might threaten his wife. It's done, she said against his chest. It's finally done. The testimony's done, he corrected gently. The living is just beginning. They returned to Dust Hollow to find it transformed yet again. The town had used the reward money from captured outlaws to build a proper schoolhouse. A new teacher from back east had been hired, though she worked closely with Calla on lesson plans. The bank, under new management after Josiah Mills' connection to the conspiracy was revealed, offered fair loans to struggling ranchers. Even a newspaper had started up, its first headline reading, Dust Hollow's daughter brings justice home. But the changes Calla treasured most were smaller, quieter. The way Lucy Palmer had officially moved in with her and Seth, calling them Ma and Pa with shy delight. The way Martha had made her a full partner in the inn, insisting she'd earned it 10 times over. The way people nodded to her on the street, not with curiosity or suspicion, but with a simple acknowledgement given to neighbors. 3 years passed in a blur of ordinary miracles. Calla learned to sleep without nightmares, to accept Seth's touch without flinching, to believe in tomorrow. She helped deliver babies, taught Sunday school, organized town celebrations. When influenza swept through, she nursed the sick alongside Doc Winters. When drought threatened, she stood with the ranchers planning water conservation. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being the outlaw's widow and became simply Calla Rourke, heart of Dust Hollow. Then came the letter that changed everything once more. It arrived on a Tuesday that had started like any other. Seth at his desk, Calla serving breakfast at the inn, Lucy practicing her letters before school, federal governments establishing a home. Seth read aloud that evening. The three of them gathered in their small kitchen. For orphaned children of criminals and lawmen alike, they want you to run it. Calla's hands stilled on the dishes. Me? Says here they were impressed by your testimony, your work with children, your understanding of unique circumstances. He looked up. It's in California. Funded position, good salary, chance to help children like Lucy on a larger scale. But Dust Hollow is our home, Lucy protested, voicing what Calla felt. Yes, Seth agreed carefully. But home can be more than one place. And think of the children who need what you needed. Lucy, a chance, a family, someone to believe in them. They discussed it for days, weighing duty against comfort, opportunity against roots. In the end, it was the memory of her own desperation at 15, alone and afraid. That decided Calla. How different might her life have been with somewhere safe to run to? The town threw them a farewell party that rivaled the Founding Day celebration. Gifts piled up, quilts for their new home, preserves for the journey, books for the future library. Tom Patterson, arm still scarred from the battle, pressed a horseshoe into Seth's hand. For luck. Widow Carson hugged Calla so tight she could barely breathe, whispering blessings. Even the Mills family, humbled by their former patriarch's disgrace, offered awkward good wishes. Martha wept openly. You brought light back to this place, she said. Now you'll carry it somewhere else. That's as it should be. The morning they left, half the town gathered to see them off. The stagecoach was loaded with their few possessions and many memories. Lucy sat between them, clutching the primer Calla had first used to teach her, now planning to help teach other children. As Dust Hollow faded into desert haze, Calla allowed herself one look back. The town that had sheltered her, fought for her, claimed her as its own, stood bathed in morning light. She could see the church where she'd married Seth, the inn where she'd learned to smile again, the schoolhouse where Lucy had bloomed. Regrets? Seth asked, echoing his question from long ago. No, Calla said firmly. Just gratitude. The home in California thrived under their care. Within a year, 30 children lived there, some orphaned by violence, others escaping abuse, all needing what Calla understood in her bones: safety, patience, and the radical belief that the past didn't define the future. She taught them letters and numbers, but more importantly, she taught them hope. Seth kept order with the same firm fairness he'd shown in Dust Hollow, becoming the father figure many had never known. Lucy, growing into a confident young woman, became a big sister to them all. Letters from Dust Hollow arrived regularly. Martha wrote of new families moving in, drawn by stories of a town that stood together. Doc Winters reported no major gunfights in 2 years running. The newspaper editor sent clippings about territorial reforms inspired by the trials Calla's testimony had made possible. 5 years after leaving, they received unexpected visitors. A delegation from Dust Hollow, led by Tom Patterson, arrived at the home's gates. Town council sent us, Tom explained, hat in hand. Got something to tell you. They gathered in the garden where children played under orange trees. A far cry from desert dust and tumbleweeds. Territorial governments finally recognizing folks who helped clean up the corruption. Tom continued. They're putting up monuments, writing official histories. Want to put your name on a plaque? Calla, hero of the territory. They're calling you. Calla laughed, the sound carrying disbelief and old pain in equal measure. I'm no hero. I was just trying to survive. That's what heroes do. Patterson said simply, they survive when others would break. They stand when others would run. They speak when others would stay silent. That's you, Mrs. Rourke. That's what you did for all of us. Looking around, at Seth's proud face, at Lucy nodding agreement, at the children who'd found safety because she'd once needed it herself, Calla felt the last shadows of the past release their hold. Tell them thank you, she said finally. But the real monument isn't a plaque. It's Dust Hollow itself, a town that chose justice over safety, that protected a stranger, that proved community is stronger than corruption. That's the legacy that matters. As the delegation departed, full of stories to carry home, Seth pulled Calla close in the garden where healing happened daily. You know what I realized? He said. Jake Monroe thought he was leaving a legacy of fear when he died. Instead, he gave us each other. He gave those children hope. He gave a whole territory the chance to choose better. Strange how hate can transform into love, Calla mused, watching Lucy teach the younger children a clapping game. Not strange, Seth corrected. Miraculous. Just like you, Calla Rourke, my outlaw bride who became a territorial hero. She kissed him then. There in the garden built on ground once watered by tears, now blooming with laughter and second chances. Somewhere out there, Dust Hollow stood against its red rock mesas, forever changed by a desperate woman's courage. Somewhere, other women trapped in violence might find their own escape routes. Somewhere, justice might triumph over corruption again and again. In small towns and big cities, wherever people chose to stand together rather than apart, the sun set over California hills, painting the sky in shades of hope. In the home for lost children, dinner bells rang and voices rose in cheerful chaos. Lucy called out that supper was ready. Seth squeezed Calla's hand one more time before they turned to go inside. The outlaw's bride had found her escape at last, not in running or hiding, but in transforming darkness into light, fear into love, survival into life abundant. And in that transformation, she'd discovered the greatest truth of all. Sometimes the most dangerous outlaws are the ones who steal our hope, and the most powerful lawmen are the ones who help us reclaim it. The story that began in blood and desperation had become something else entirely, a testament to the power of choice, the strength of community, and the wild possibility that even the darkest past could give birth to the brightest future, in Dust Hollow and beyond. The legend grew with each telling, not of the outlaw's bride who'd carried deadly secrets, but of the woman who'd chosen courage over comfort, testimony over silence, love over fear, and in a home filled with children's laughter, where broken souls learned to mend. Calla Monroe Rourke finally understood. She'd never been the outlaw's bride at all. She'd always been her own woman, writing her own story, choosing her own ending. And what an ending it was, not an ending at all, really, but a beginning that stretched as wide and promising as the western sky. Thank you all for listening to this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. I'm curious to know where in the world you're hearing this story. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles, just as Calla connected hearts across the frontier. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage and hope from America's untamed past. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Calla and Seth's story. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own horizons.